They told me to throw away a room that had been locked for 40 years, and the man giving me the order made sure I knew I was just the guy holding the trash bags. He dropped an old rusty key into a bucket of dirty mop water, looked me right in the eyes, and said, "Pick it up, buddy. Room 214, empty by sunrise, or empty your locker." What he didn't know was that the little piece of metal he just threw away was about to uncover the truth behind a man's ruined reputation. My name is Walter Hayes. I was 61 years old when this happened, and I had spent 11 years keeping the halls of Briarwood Central High School clean, quiet, and mostly invisible. That was the thing about being a custodian. People noticed you when something was dirty, when something was broken, or when someone needed something done. But most days, they looked right through you like you were part of the furniture. And honestly, I was fine with that. I wasn't looking for attention. I had a simple job. I did it well, and I took pride in it. My father used to tell me, a person's character shows in the things they do when nobody is watching. I carried that with me every day, even when nobody seemed to care. But that night, nobody was supposed to be watching. The school was almost empty. The football field lights were off. The hallways were silent, and the only sounds were my cartwheels squeaking across the old tile floor and the hum of the aging fluorescent lights above me. The school board had approved a massive renovation project, which meant the oldest section of the building was scheduled to be cleared out before construction started. Room 214 was on the list. Nobody had opened that door in decades. According to Marcus Vale, the facilities director overseeing the renovation, everything inside was garbage. Old papers, broken equipment, junk from another century, he told me. Don't waste time sorting through memories, Walter. Just clear it out. Marcus was the kind of guy who always looked like he was 5 minutes away from an important meeting, even when he was just standing in a hallway. Expensive watch, polished shoes, perfect haircut, and that tone some people use when they've decided your opinion doesn't matter before you even speak. He wasn't a monster, but he had a dangerous habit. He believed efficiency was more important than people. He walked into the hallway around midnight while I was finishing another section and tossed the old key toward the bucket beside my cart. It bounced once on the rim, then sank into gray water mixed with floor cleaner and dirt. He watched it disappear. "There you go," he said with a smirk. "Now you can get your hands dirty and earn that paycheck." I looked at the key sitting beneath the water. The funny thing was, I'd spent years cleaning messes other people created. Spilled drinks, muddy footprints, broken glass, you name it. But that moment felt different. It wasn't about the key. It was about the way he wanted me to feel. Small, invisible, like I was just another thing to be moved around. I reached in, pulled it out, wiped it on my work shirt, and looked at the numbers stamped into the metal. 214. I had walked past that door hundreds of times. I had wondered what was behind it, but never enough to ask. Marcus noticed me staring. "Don't start playing detective," he said. "That room hasn't mattered in years." Maybe he was right. Maybe it was just an old room full of forgotten junk. But something about the way he said it bothered me. People usually don't say something doesn't matter unless they're trying to convince themselves. I unlocked the door, and the smell hit me immediately. Old wood, dust, paper, and the kind of forgotten air that only exists in places nobody has entered for a very long time. I switched on my flashlight because half the lights inside were dead. Dust floated through the beam like tiny pieces of history falling apart in front of me. There were stacks of old sports equipment, boxes of school programs, cracked trophies, and faded photographs leaning against the wall. It looked less like a storage room and more like a graveyard for memories. I was about to start loading everything into boxes when someone behind me whispered, "Wait, where did you find that key?" I turned around and saw Evelyn Carter, the school's retired theater teacher, standing in the doorway. She had worked at Briarwood for 35 years and knew every rumor, every secret, and every story that had ever walked those halls. Her eyes moved from the open door to the dusty room behind me, and her expression changed. "That room hasn't been open since 1987, she said quietly. "Why?" I asked. She stepped inside slowly, almost like she was afraid of waking something up. Then she saw a paper sitting on top of one of the boxes. She picked it up, read the date, and went completely still. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is the room where they kept the championship banner." I had no idea what she was talking about. Then she told me a story that almost everyone at the school had forgotten. Back in 1987, Briarwood's basketball team won the state championship. It was the biggest moment in the school's history. But a few weeks later, the championship banner disappeared. The school blamed the coach, Thomas Reed. They said he must have taken it because he was angry about contract negotiations. He denied it until the day he died. He lost his job, his reputation, and according to Evelyn, a piece of himself. That man spent the rest of his life trying to prove he didn't steal anything, she said. But nobody wanted to listen anymore. I looked around the room again. Suddenly, it didn't feel like a storage room. It felt like someone had buried a story here and hoped nobody would ever dig it back up. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I wasn't going to be able to simply throw everything away and walk out. But before I could say anything, Marcus appeared in the doorway. His face tightened when he saw Evelyn standing there. "Walter," he said sharply, "I told you to clear this room, not open a history museum." I looked at the boxes, then back at him. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about keeping my job. I was thinking about a man who spent 40 years carrying a lie that might not have belonged to him. Marcus stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You really want to lose your locker over some old junk?" I stared at the room behind me and knew there was something here he didn't want found. So I picked up my flashlight, walked deeper inside, and started searching. Because sometimes the things people call worthless are exactly the things they're most afraid you'll discover. I don't know if Marcus Vale realized it in that moment, but the second he told me to stop looking, he gave me the one reason I needed to keep going. I had spent most of my life avoiding trouble. I wasn't the guy who argued with managers. I wasn't the guy who complained, and I definitely wasn't the guy who thought he could change the world one dusty storage room at a time. I was just Walter Hayes, a custodian who showed up every morning, did his job, and went home. But standing there in room 214, with Evelyn Carter staring at a piece of paper from 1987 and Marcus standing behind me trying to shut everything down, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like someone had finally handed me a reason to speak. "You heard me," Marcus said. "The room gets cleared tonight." I looked at him and asked, "Why are you in such a hurry to throw away things nobody has looked at in 40 years? He smiled, but there was no humor in it, because unlike some people, I understand the difference between history and clutter. Evelyn crossed her arms. "Funny. Most people who destroy history usually call it clutter first." Marcus gave her a cold look. He knew Evelyn had been around too long to intimidate. She had watched principals come and go, watched teachers retire, watched generations of students walk these halls. She remembered things people like Marcus hoped everyone would forget. "Walter," he said, pointing toward the door, "I'm giving you a simple instruction. Don't make this complicated." Then he walked away, and that was the moment I realized something. Marcus didn't care about the room being empty. He cared about what was inside it staying forgotten. After he left, Evelyn looked at me and shook her head. "I haven't seen anyone challenge that man since he got promoted." I laughed a little. "I wouldn't call it challenging. I'm still the guy who empties trash cans." She smiled. "Maybe, but sometimes the person holding the trash bag is the only one willing to pick up what everyone else ignores." That night, I stopped thinking like a custodian and started thinking like someone searching for an answer. I moved carefully through the room, opening boxes, checking folders, and looking through old equipment. There were pieces of Briarwood's past everywhere. A broken microphone from a school play, old yearbooks with handwritten notes inside, trophies with names scratched into the metal. It was strange. People spend their whole lives trying to leave something behind, and then years later, someone puts it in a box and labels it unnecessary. Around 2 a.m., I found an old wooden crate pushed against the wall. It was nailed shut, but the wood was cracked from age. I called Evelyn over. "Think this is anything?" She shrugged. "At this point, Walter, I think that room has been waiting longer than we've been alive." I grabbed a small crowbar from my cart and carefully opened it. Inside were old game programs, photographs, newspaper clippings, and a stack of documents tied together with faded string. I picked up one of the photos. It showed Coach Thomas Reed standing with his team after their championship win. He was smiling, surrounded by teenagers who looked like they had just achieved the impossible. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "The night they believed in us." Evelyn looked at the picture and got quiet. "He loved those kids," she said. "That's what people forgot. They turned him into a rumor instead of remembering he was a person." I kept searching. Then I found something strange, a maintenance report from the same year. It mentioned room 214, but the handwriting was difficult to read. Most of it was faded, but one sentence stood out. "Moved championship materials temporarily during renovation." I felt my heart speed up a little. Evelyn, look at this. She grabbed the paper. Her eyes moved across the page. Moved temporarily, she repeated. That means someone knew it was here. Before we could dig deeper, the door opened again. Marcus was back. This time he wasn't angry. He looked nervous, and nervous people always reveal more than angry people. Still here? He asked. I looked at the clock. You told me to empty the room by sunrise. I'm working. He stepped inside and looked around. His eyes immediately went toward the back corner, just for a second, but I saw it. He knew something was there. You need to stop this, he said quietly. You don't understand what you're dealing with, I asked. Then explain it to me. He didn't answer. He just walked away again. That was enough. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the corner he looked at. Behind a stack of old gym mats, there was a narrow space between the wall and the storage shelves. I moved the first mat. Nothing. The second one. Nothing. Then I pulled the third one forward, and something heavy shifted behind it. I froze. Evelyn held her breath. Slowly, I moved the mat aside. A folded piece of fabric slid down and landed on the floor. For a second, neither of us moved. Dust covered it. The colors were faded, but underneath the dirt was deep blue fabric with gold lettering. My hand started shaking as I unfolded it. Then the words appeared. Briarwood Central, 1987 state champions. The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence where you can almost hear the past catching up with the present. Evelyn covered her mouth with both hands. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was right there in front of us. The banner everyone thought was stolen had never left the school. It had been sitting behind those mats for 40 years, hidden in the same room where someone had locked away the truth. I just stood there holding it, thinking about Coach Reed, a man who spent decades being called a thief because nobody bothered to search one more room, a man who died without hearing the words he deserved. And then Marcus appeared at the door again. This time, he didn't say anything. He just stared at the banner in my hands. The confidence was gone from his face. Evelyn looked at him and said, You knew. Marcus swallowed. I knew there was something in here. And you were going to throw it away, she asked. He looked down. The renovation had deadlines. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A deadline was more important than clearing a man's name? He didn't answer. Because sometimes silence is the closest thing a person has to admitting they were wrong. The next morning, the entire school knew. The banner was cleaned, restored, and placed in the main entrance where everyone could see it. Students stopped in the hallway looking up at it. Teachers took pictures. Alumni started sharing memories. But the biggest moment came when Principal Daniel Brooks called the daughter of Coach Reed. Her name was Allison Reed. She was 60 years old, and for most of her life, she had heard people whisper about her father. When she arrived at the school and saw the banner hanging there, she started crying. Not because of the fabric, not because of the championship, because for the first time in 40 years, her father's name was finally being spoken differently. Principal Brooks opened the old records, reviewed the evidence, and made the correction that should have happened decades earlier. The school officially cleared Coach Thomas Reed's name. They added one word beside his record. Exonerated. But the story wasn't over yet, because a few days later, I got called into the principal's office, and I thought I knew exactly why. I thought maybe Marcus had complained. Maybe I had pushed too far. Maybe after all of this, I was about to lose the job I depended on. But when I walked in, Principal Brooks wasn't angry. He was holding something in his hand, a small brass key, and when he placed it on the desk in front of me, I realized my life at Briarwood was about to change in a way I never expected. Principal Brooks slid the brass key across the desk and looked at me for a moment before saying anything. I remember thinking, here it comes. This was the part where someone explained that I had caused too much trouble, that I should have followed orders, that people like me weren't supposed to dig into things above our pay grade. I had lived long enough to know that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't always come with a reward. Sometimes it just comes with consequences. But then, Brooks smiled and said, This opens the archive room. I looked at him, confused. The archive room? He nodded. The place where we keep the history of this school. And after what you found, I think it belongs with someone who understands that old things aren't always useless. I didn't know what to say. I had spent years walking through those halls feeling like I was part of the background, someone people noticed only when the floor was dirty or the trash needed emptying. But that day, for the first time, I felt like I had actually contributed something bigger than a clean hallway. I had helped return a piece of someone's life, A few months later, the story of Coach Reed became part of the school's annual history program. Students learned what happened, not as some old rumor, but as a lesson about patience, assumptions, and the danger of judging people before knowing the truth. Marcus Vail eventually left the renovation project and never found out exactly what happened behind closed doors. And honestly, I didn't spend much time wondering. People like Marcus usually don't change because someone embarrasses them. They change when they finally realize the things they ignored had value all along. Every now and then, I still walk past room 214. It's no longer a forgotten storage space. The school restored it and turned it into a small history room. There are pictures on the walls, old trophies in glass cases, and right in the center hangs the 1987 championship banner. Sometimes students ask me how we found it. I always tell them the same thing. Someone was about to throw it away. And then I tell them something else. I tell them that the world is full of things we don't understand. Old photographs, forgotten records, people who seem ordinary, stories that everyone stopped listening to. We're quick to label things as worthless when they don't look important anymore. But sometimes the things buried under dust are the things that deserve to be seen the most. Looking back, the strangest part isn't that we found the banner. The strangest part is thinking about how close we came to losing it forever. If Marcus had gotten his way, that room would have been emptied, the boxes would have disappeared, and Coach Reed's name might have stayed damaged forever. All because everyone was too busy moving forward to look back for one more minute. I still keep that old rusty key in my desk drawer. Not because it opens anything anymore, but because it reminds me of one simple truth. A key doesn't have value because of the door it opens. Sometimes its value comes from the secrets it protects. So let me ask you something. If you were standing in that hallway that night, with someone ordering you to throw away a locked room full of old belongings, would you have followed the instructions and walked away? Or would you have taken the risk and searched for the truth? Do you think Marcus was just doing his job? Or do you think he crossed a line by trying to erase something he didn't understand? I want to hear your opinion in the comments. Because sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought over money or power. Sometimes they're fought over whether someone's story deserves to be remembered. If this story made you think twice about the things we ignore every day, share it with someone who believes every forgotten thing has a story. And remember, sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who finds what everyone else missed.